Hey everybody, this is Nick Stett, Protocol's video game reporter, and we're here today to talk about gaming platforms and how those are changing. Gaming platforms used to be defined by, the hardware you played on, arcades, home consoles, computers, now phones, but that's starting to change pretty dramatically thanks to big changes in software, big changes in distribution models and business models. And we have three guests here today who are going to talk all about that. And these people have been in the game industry for many, many years. They have a lot of experience with maneuvering the changes in the game industry. And we're going to have a really interesting conversation about how all that's going. So hi, everybody. And I'm just going to run through the three of you and give you a chance to just introduce yourselves and also to say a little bit about yourself, your work, and maybe a little bit of your history in the game industry. So why don't we start first with the person whose face looks like they are next to mine. That's Kelly Santiago.
All right. Hi. Yeah, I'm a director of external publishing at Niantic. I've been a game developer myself, moved into developer relations and publishing with Ouya, the kickstarted Android console, and then did similar work at Google for Daydream with VR and AR before joining Niantic.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being here, Kelly. And why don't we move on to Chris?
Hi, everyone. Chris Mahoney, Senior Director of Central Product and Emerging Platforms at Zynga. I've been at Zynga for about 2.5 years. Before that, I worked with King and also at PlayStation for 5 years. And I started my career in Second Life. So I've sort of a mix the last 15 years in virtual worlds and in games. Excited to be here.
Cool. And now, lastly, Frederick.
Hello, good morning, good evening, everybody. My name is Frederick Descamps. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Manticore Games. We are the maker and operator of Core, which is a UGC gaming metaverse platform. I started my career in gaming straight out of business school, paid $10 an hour at Xfire, which was then acquired by MTV in 2006. Then I went to Try On Worlds to work on some MMOs, and then started a company called A Bit Lucky, which eventually was acquired by Zynga, where I spent 4 years making games and doing M&A. And a few years ago, started Manticore Games to change the way games are played and consumed and help build the metaverse.
Great. Thank you all so much for being here. And I'm glad you mentioned the metaverse, Frederick, because I thought we would start with that. It's a kind of the topic of the moment, a very big topic. A lot of companies are talking about the metaverse as the next gen internet, the new mobile. Obviously, there's a lot of implications for work, for business, but obviously the gaming industry has been involved in talking about virtual worlds and this idea of the metaverse for very long. Second Life, decades ago, MMOs for a very long time. So I thought, why don't we start with you, Frederick, just because of your work on Core, whether all this conversation around the metaverse, have you found that to be kind of validating for the work you've been doing or invigorating in any way? Or do you feel like people kind of have the wrong idea about the metaverse and that the way that it's going to work in reality or in gaming in particular, isn't that maybe not quite how people are imagining right now or how they see it in the movies?
Well, it sounds like it's a leading question. So the first part of your question, of course, it is validating because we've been talking about the metaverse, the multiverse for many, many years as one of the foundational ideas for what we do. Though we started with clear ideas around UGC in gaming and how to make games much more easily to create, publish, and monetize and play. So for sure, it's validating because we've been talking about it, I guess, before it became yet again the zeitgeist, the buzzword du jour. Yeah, I mean, look, it's extremely exciting because yes, you can be sometimes a little cynical, skeptical about buzzwords or people who say, oh, it's just a fad. The truth is that there is such an immense amount of energy behind this movement, right? And there is so much creativity. There are new people getting involved because that's something that they've been waiting for many years. So it's exciting. It's also trans-platform, right? Like I think the industry, as part of the topic, is platforms, right? And for many, many decades now, we've been defining PC versus console versus mobile. And truly, I think all that is going to be trans-platform. It's an all-encompassing encompassing concept. And again, the fact that it can be defined in so many ways, that's what's so exciting, right? You have people contributing at it from a gaming UGC perspective like us, or live events like us too actually now. And then you have people coming at it from a completely different angle, and even now with crypto, right? And Niantic has its own approach. I think they've also been building the metaverse for many years before it was rebranded that way. Zynga, I don't know, right? But it's kind of exciting to see all this energy and these different approaches, different people.
And Kelly, I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on Niantic's kind of view of the metaverse, because I know CEO John Hanke has got his own perspective around what the metaverse is and how it's going to involve, in particular, technologies like augmented reality. And I'm curious, maybe before you were at Niantic, what you thought of that. There's Frederick with Pokemon.
I'm in the metaverse.
Yeah, I'm curious what your kind of opinions on the metaverse were, or that idea of this all-encompassing virtual world, and maybe how that's changed since you've been at Niantic.
Oh, I mean, fundamentally, the line that I love from John, our CEO, is it's connecting bits to atoms. And that's really what's underlying all of this, is the connection of the internet, the computing powers, the cloud computing, but tying it to the real world, and those connection, that place where it meets, those two things meet together, is really important. That certainly Niantic is out to have this juncture fuel a deeper connection with the world, deeper connection with each other, and steer away from trying to use it for pure escapism, I guess, or to further divide us. And so that's also something that really inspires me of Niantic's approach, is that I think there's the challenge with like the phrase metaverse and the putting it out there, sort of like the full package of what that means, I think then creates this image in people's minds that's almost like predestined, where it's all headed. And the reality is it's just so much more in a more experimental iterative state right now. And so while, we are working on what that headset future may look like, we also are just day to day working on mobile devices, meeting people where they're at right now, to really iterate and be experimenting as much as possible in this phase of evolution.
Right. Yeah. And I love that idea of building things that people can use right now, instead of this idea of telling people it's 5, 10, 15 years down the pipeline. And I know Chris with Zynga, Zynga's been all about kind of maneuvering the platforms that are kind of just emerging right as they're happening, whether it's browsers, Facebook, mobile, now console. And I know, with your unique experience at Second Life, you probably have kind of seen all of these cycles turn over lots of times. I'm curious kind of how you're looking at this from, the product side, and whether, is the metaverse just something that, is going to perpetually be kind of on the horizon, and Zynga's just going to kind of meet people where they're at?
Yeah, I mean, Zynga wants to be everywhere gamers are, and I think we're seeing that gamers are actually appearing in lots of different platforms everywhere. Like you mentioned, emerging platforms. We've launched games on Amazon Alexa, Google Nest Hub, Snapchat, TikTok. We're sort of known for the Android and Apple games we create, but we've created a number of games there. When it comes to the metaverse, I mean, I'm a big believer, and I agree with a lot of things that Kelly and Frederick said. I should also mention, when I was at PlayStation, I worked on PlayStation Home, which was like their PS3 metaverse, right? So, and to be honest, I often think back to something Philip Rosedale said to me at Second Life in 2006, right? And he used to tell us, if you think about all the forms of human communication, the most native to us is in a 3D, persistent, photorealistic, synchronous, world that's called reality, right? And for tens of thousands of years, that's how humans have communicated, right, and interacted. And if you take that as given, every other form of human communication is kind of like a little artificial, right? Like cave drawings and paintings, right, was like a way for us to communicate ideas and feelings, right? The word text has had a pretty good run, right? But my 2-year-old daughter has to learn how to read. She interacts natively with the 3D world around her, right? Same with like telephones, audio only, Zoom and FaceTime, which are hugely helpful to us weathering this, time in human history when we're so isolated. But they're still 2D flat experiences. So I think once metaverses are sort of 3D, persistent, highly concurrent, photorealistic worlds with like, all these, physics, the mirror of the real world, I think you'll actually see that every area of life will be impacted, buying cars, buying houses, finding romance, going to work and games, and so that's something we're really looking at as Zynga is like, what are those implications? I definitely think mobile games will be there, but to be honest, I think, sort of PC and console games might be the most, benefit the most from a metaverse because the form factor already is so similar. So you could, without having the energy barrier of downloading a game or, paying $60, you could jump into some of those native experiences, play them, and then if you like them, sort of continue on with your friends. So the big takeaway is we're watching this at Zynga, because I think it will be formative to the industry.
Right, and a lot of the conversation around the metaverse right now is it's around this idea of like a lot of converging technologies that are kind of some way far out, some maybe closer than others, some that are here right now. But it seems to me that to get there, it's going to involve a lot of kind of walls coming down and barriers coming down that prevent people from doing things that they would that they're going to have to do in the future to make things interoperable. So. Frederick, I'm curious, when you're building Core, you've made it to be PC only, and you said you've been looking at other platforms. I'm curious, what freedom do you see in kind of the PC space right now, and how are you evaluating other platforms and like how that might change the way that your platform operates, especially with user-generated content and with monetizing games?
Well, lots of questions. Very dense question. Thank you. We started with PC because, as a startup, you have to pick your battles, right? We're not Zynga, we're not Niantic, we're still small, we're 110 people. We're still kind of at the very early stages. We just launched Core in open beta this year, right? A few months ago. So we started with PC for all sorts of good reasons, right? It's a powerful platform. It's very open. We're built on top of Unreal, so that was kind of a natural place for us to start, especially when you're talking about lowering the barriers to creativity in games, right? Making games is extremely hard. Most games are still made mostly on PC, like even mobile games, like when you do PC or Macs, but you go around and you have nobody programming a game directly on a phone. The phone is the target, right? So PC was a natural platform for us to start with. Because it's also a natural place of modding and UGC historically and technically that has lots of power, right? But we are, of course, going to be on other platforms. So we'll be on mobile soon. We'll be, of course, mobile and Mac. We'll be on consoles. We'll be likely in VR. That's a platform we've evaluated recently. My co-founder, Jordan, was actually the head of VR at Zynga for many years. He published 3 games, I believe, under Zynga's name in VR, but the VR market was very, very low in terms of reach, and but it has changed. It's changing. I mean, I have, as you can see, I have the Oculus Quest 2, and oh wow, it's an amazing platform. It's just like I had gotten out of VR for a few years, and it's just night and day, right? It's just so that's we're looking at these platforms in terms of course, opportunistic market access, but also where the users are. Each platform has its own type of users, right? Like right now, when we're working on mobile, you realize having a mobile. I mean, that's funny to see that in front of Zynga and Niantic, who now are kind of mobile native companies. In some ways, the experience has to be very different than on PC. So we have to redefine the way we present Core to the users.
And on the topic of adapting to different platforms, Chris, I'm curious. There's been a lot of debate right now around mobile app store commissions. Obviously, Epic Games has been fighting Apple and Google with Fortnite. I'm curious, how Zynga looks at now that Zynga is expanding just beyond mobile, how you're looking at platforms, monetization on those platforms, and like how you are looking at relationships with the platform operator, because many of them do have these kind of traditional models where they want to be the gatekeepers of what gets out there. And maybe in the future that changes, but it seems like right now a lot of game makers are kind of playing by the rules of Apple and Google and other store owners.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, Zynga wants to be everywhere gamers are, and I think there's a very strong signal coming from millions of gamers everywhere that they want and sometimes expect crossplay experiences, right? If you look at, Fortnite, PUBG, Minecraft, Genshin Impact, right? These are games that exist across devices and include millions of users and billions of revenue for some of these companies. And so, we're looking at that and, and taking it very seriously. Our first announcement that we had just this year was around Star Wars Hunters. We are a mobile first company, like Frederick said. But, we see people like moving to multiple platforms, and we're going to be launching Star Wars Hunters on both mobile and later Nintendo Switch, which I think, again, does give that access to other users. At the end of the day, it's just like the technologies underlying these things are expanding access for developers to create multi-device experiences, right? Like Unreal has, come up with a number of, Epic has come up with a number of very impressive Unreal 5 demos, right? Unity continues to do great things, Amazon Web Services and 5G. I think you're starting to see like, mobile actually be a parity with, or close to parity with like PC and console. And again, users are telling us they want these experiences. So, other things that we've done at Zynga to sort of, deliver these kind of experiences is, we recently acquired Ectra, which is a company that comes from this sort of PC console space with the Torchlight series, and they all worked on Diablo. And they're a very powerful team. I'd like to hope we're teaching something about mobile, but they're teaching us a lot about PC and console. So I think it's just the beginning of these experiences being multi-device experiences. And to your question, Nick, it's like, I think, some of the business models may evolve as that happens, and something that we're watching very closely as we sort of toe dip in this space.
Right, and Kelly, with Niantic, I know Niantic, like Kristen and Frederick mentioned, is kind of a mobile first company, but there's obviously new devices on the horizon, right? There's smart glasses, AR devices, potentially, I guess, a combination of AR and VR and mixed reality. I guess how are you and with your work with developers and with the team at Niantic looking at how to balance between stuff that can be accessible right now and like what might work on like a cross-platform situation where it's on phones but it's also on VR, AR devices?
Yeah, we are running some projects that are looking at exactly at what you said, because when you think about AR only interfaces, that's different than when you have the 2D map and there's AR modes within that experience. This is the stuff that like keeps me doing games, right? Which is like, there's always new challenges and new questions, and the technology, like the form and function are so interwoven, right? The slightest change in the interface, when you're talking about someone playing a game sitting on their couch versus someone playing a game while they're walking down their sidewalk, it has huge impacts across the way the experience feels, and what you can do and what you can't do. So it's a really exciting problem space to be in, for sure.
And just as a follow-up there, I mean, I know Niantic is very much around augmented reality and kind of having people go out in the real world. Do you see kind of room there for VR or for mixed reality experiences? And I mean, I guess, how do you see that kind of progressing, especially in the gaming space where, lots of games, VR games today, obviously take you out. They, like you said, escapism, they pull you into this virtual world. Do you see any kind of ability to mix those two in a gaming context?
It's a hot topic around the office at Niantic, for sure. I was thinking about this as Chris was talking, that one of these components of like the metaverse feeling so close and so real now is also audiences' appetite for these IPs, worlds like Minecraft and Fortnite, where it's like you're interacting with these things in different ways on different devices, and there's different modes depending on like what mood you're in, or if you're with a friend or not, and all these things. And so I think like that is going to continue. When we look at our experiences, we compare them. I mean, I think this is true for many companies. It's not just with other games. It's like, how do we stack with the myriad of options a person has today to be entertained or like enhance their experience in this moment. So, you know, I feel like that we should be open to experiences that, you know, have possibly multiple touch points. And it's about engaging people in a universe or in a world where they're encouraged to then also take that experience out into the real world or share it with other people. But I think that's always fundamentally Niantic's mission is to inspire people to explore the world together. So
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, kind of just following on that topic, Frederick, I'm interested in, you know, obviously Core's big thing is user generated content, and that, you know, that has been a trend that we've seen evolving over many years. It's something I kind of personally missed as a gamer. I was never into Minecraft, and now suddenly I feel like all of these games are really having these like creative renaissances around building your own experiences, building your own games. It seems like that's going to only get bigger and bigger. I'm just curious, you know, where you see user-generated content, how is that going to be squared in the future against these kind of premium offerings, or a lot of these companies that want to get into gaming, but they want to bring their you know, their high-end IP and they want to put it in the game. How do you see kind of juggling those two worlds in the future, especially as, you know, as Kelly said, as these experiences go completely cross-platform and on all different devices?
Well, Nick, you are good at asking very dense questions. It was one question, and it's actually three questions. Where to start? I mean, UGC is fundamentally part of gaming, right? Like some of the biggest games, the biggest franchises today come from UGC. Counter-Strike, UGC, it was a mod of Half-Life, obviously. Riot and League of Legends, right, based on Dota and Strife, etc. Roblox, of course, Twitch, right? So I would say UGC is not widely embraced by the big corporations. They are a little scared of it because of IP, because of fiefdoms, politics, etc. Like when we talk to some of them, it's like you can see that they are, even though I've known Roblox for 14, 15 years now. You know, I saw them take off like crazy, like 6-7 years ago. Actually, when I was at Zynga, we looked at them for, you know, in the context of strategy on M&A, and you know, most people still don't understand their model, and let alone back then 6-7 years ago. But when I looked at them, actually, to credit to Mark Pincus, we are looking at them, and most of the execs were appalled by the graphics. And the top game was Escape the Toilet Bowl. But most of these games we looked at had over 150,000 DAU, which was more than most of the Zynga games back then. And the execs were kind of appalled by the quality of the game and the graphics. And Mark was in the room and said, guys, you're not getting it. This is a social network. It's an MMO for kids, a social network for kids. And of course, it's all UGC powered. So the power of UGC in gaming, I think, hasn't been fully realized. I mean, we've seen some of it in Second Life. We've seen some of it through some modding. We've seen Roblox. I think, of course, the growth is still ahead of us. Gaming is still vastly gated by the fact it's so hard to make games. It's so technical. You pick an engine, you hire a team. Most teams stay away, especially in indie game development, they stay away from real-time multiplayer games because it's almost impossible to make. It's like landing a rocket on the moon, or a spaceship, landing a spaceship on the moon. And so that's what we wanted to do. Really wanted to open up creativity by lowering all the barriers, especially technical barriers. And then after that, it's really, you see what happens on the platform. We started with a very strong conviction that it would be all about games and players. And what we're finding out is it's likely going to be just one part of what we do. People do silly stuff, which typically that's what you should look at. What do? They go into Core World, which is the big gateway where you get into Core, this beautiful real-time 3D environment, and you see other people, and then you go through these portals to games, experiences, concerts, etc. Lots of people stay in Core World and they dance, they chat, they do all sorts of contests, they race their little cars on their mounts. So, you know, we're going from game making and players to now we're enlarging, broadening the definition of what core is. And I think lots of these platforms are going to find the same thing, right? It's usually based around social, sometimes clear, sometimes unclear user benefits. I mean, I think one of the biggest metaverse play right now is, for instance, Discord. I think it's also a Pokemon Go, right? I've met so many people thanks to Pokemon Go. I've met so many people thanks to Discord. And quite frankly, this is not the traditional definition of multiplayer or social. You could argue when you look at Pokemon Go, it's not social at all. In the app, it's minor, but in real life, it's super social, right? You go into Discord and there is no graphic. The user interface is very primitive still, but you have amazing moments, right? So, yeah, I think I've answered only 1/3 of your question, but I don't know the rest.
No, that was great. And yeah, I mean, on that, I think that's a really interesting topic that you kind of mentioned was accessibility and just having things be accessible to players, not just to make their own games, but also to access games themselves. I mean, there's obviously a big market for really photorealistic, ever more expensive games.
Actually, I disagree. I want to throw a little bit of controversy. Totally disagree with that. Totally disagree with what Chris was saying, which is funny because from Zynga and Niantic have been the biggest pushers of the revolution in gaming. One of the most important is bringing new people to gaming, right? You remember 10, 12 years ago when people were poo-pooing social games, those are not real games. And so I should make the voice, those are not real games, are not real game developers. And we're like, they brought tens of millions, hundreds of millions of new players who didn't always see themselves as players. Same thing with Niantic Labs and Pokemon Go. I mean, it's a game and lots of the gaming people play it, but they brought so many new people to gaming, which is amazing. I think the metaverse has a huge thank you to give to these companies for being possible, because they've brought so many new people to the industry, right? Which sounds like so cloistered and gated, but so I don't think it's photorealistic at all. I mean, look at Pokemon Go; it's like cutesy graphics with the sounds of a Pokemon game from 20 years ago. By all accounts, it shouldn't have been a hit, right? It would have never been launched at Zynga, I can tell you that. But it's one of the largest games ever made, and still people are playing it. My kids are playing it almost every day, right? And same thing with the Zynga games. You look at the Zynga games, the original Zynga games. I mean, the industry hated them. Okay, but they were the most popular games on the planet, right? So I don't think photorealistic has anything to do with it. I think immersive in some ways, but
no, I mean, it's interesting you're hitting on that, because I was just catching up on the trailers dropped at the Video Game Awards last week, and I was kind of shocked how there's still, I think, mainly like super photorealistic console narrative-based games, and it was like, I don't know. It doesn't feel, maybe it's just like I'm out of touch with it. But like, that is one thing, though, even when we're thinking about designing the metaverse, there's still like relatively old people, such as myself, like, running these initiatives and like setting out the content strategies. And that envisioning of like the kinds of experiences like we play, I think are still rooted in some of that. In as much as like, I really want to, practically be in an RPG, but in the real world. Like I'm going on quests and I'm living out these stories, and like I'm invested at that level. And I'm not sure like that's really where the market is or where it's headed anymore, where it feels more bite-sized, meet me where I'm at. Like I want little point. I mean, I think Zynga also like kind of coined this of like the little points of interaction throughout my day. And like, I feel like entertainment is going more and more in that direction.
Yeah,
I actually be there.
Totally. I actually totally agree. And I think maybe Frederick, you and I are agreeing more than not, right? When I talk about photorealistic for the metaverse, I mean, what I really think is like, how do we go from like millions of users to billions, right? And I think when we have that capacity and the capability to deliver all kinds of different gaming experiences, including photorealistic, then all of a sudden there will be, maybe Kelly, like this thing you're talking about where you can jump into an RPG that's like almost like reality, like Matrix-esque, right? And I think that could be super exciting. That said, it's like I've spent over 1,000 hours in Minecraft. Nick, you said you don't play it, but I play a ton of it, right? And like, here's a game that's like, an 8-bit graphic game or a 64-bit graphic game, right? And it's just, and it's super compelling because the game loop is super fun, and Frederick, like you said, with mobile games, they don't have to be photorealistic quite often. They're bite-sized, snackable bits of entertainment.
Look at UGC,
it's about the diversity of content that you could experience in the
Look at UGC, right? Everybody was poo-pooing YouTube in the early days, TikTok, etc., Roblox. And lo and behold, right? Like I'm spending, I rarely watch TV. I can, but maybe because of the company and the kids too. But I spend an innate amount of time on YouTube, right? I mean, YouTube is at massive scale now, obviously, but and we haven't seen that necessarily in gaming, maybe except in Second Life. And I think that's the promise of the metaverse, right? Which is like these big authored worlds. There will always be. I'm a huge WoW player. Used to be. I'm a huge Apex player. I like these massively authored, expensive games, but the reality is that it's going to go probably more and more in large part toward this more UGC world, very participative, very social, where everybody is a creator, everybody is a contributor. Whether you're a social organizer, you can organize events, get together, etc., dance parties, DJ party. I mean, a dance party where I guess it was a DJ. Or other things, or you can be a high-end game developer and call. That's what we've seen, right? We've seen like a redefinition of who gets to create and participate. We have on the platform, lots of people who are not traditionally found in gaming making games. We have teenagers, we have moms, we have a mom of 4 who is one of our top developers. We have PhD students who are top developers. We have retirees who are top developers on the platform. So those people are traditionally not found in gaming. It's kind of akin to what you've seen on YouTube, TikTok, etc. Where you have new talents all of a sudden from all over the world. There is no barriers for you on YouTube or TikTok to become a celebrity, hopefully for the right reason, wherever you are, whomever you are in the world, and then access to economic opportunities. That's something we rarely talk about in gaming. But it's, to me, that's the next phase, right? The phase of where people have access to creativity anywhere they are in the world, whomever they are. We don't need to know what they look like, who they are, etc. It's just all about their creativity, expressed in maybe some sort of 3D virtual environment. But also they have access to new economic opportunities, especially with crypto, for instance, right?
I think it's not just their creativity, but their playfulness. Like that's what we uniquely are situated to do in games. And I think there's an element of like the single player linear games I always thought was sort of by necessity of the platforms at the time, these like computers we had in our houses that didn't have high-speed internet. And so those are the things you could play. But that's not, playfulness in our culture is not single player. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to ask you about, Kelly, too, was that, a term that my colleague David Pierce told me was that, this idea of a casual metaverse. So something around accessibility where, it's not about needing to own that really expensive VR headset or needing to own that really expensive device or phone or what have you, but something that is, as Frederick was talking about, like kind of accessible to many more people because of maybe the graphics being not so sophisticated or because of the very nature of the platform just makes it so that it can be bite-sized or more easily, displayed on whatever device you have. I guess I'm curious how you and Niantic are looking at the future of like accessibility really, and just like how to balance like having cutting edge new features around like occlusion and augmented reality, and how just having core game design that just brings in new players.
Yeah, I mean, it's like an ongoing conversation, and it's game by game, certainly. I think at this moment, with the state of technology and hardware compatibility, there's it's a very explicit choice you're making around, just like in any game project. You start with what is the experience you're trying to build, and then who is the target audience for that, and then like building the business case around that. And the platforms and features are even more tightly connected. So when we make things that are leaning on more high-end technology, it's a very deliberate choice. And then the edict around wide accessibility in our products is another choice, depending on the experience that we're intending to make. And then we think a lot as well around accessibility in developers and who has access to building these things, right? And the last year, my team built out this Black Developers Initiative, off of our BLM commitment from the summer of 2020 to fund Black-led development teams in this space. And it's totally true. Like everything you expect about it is like they come with also their own perspectives on what is accessible and what is not, what is safe and what is not. And it's been just really awesome in the development of Niantic as a company and our perspectives on how we approach accessibility. And so it's really, come to fruition is like you bring more voices into the room and it makes you better. And it also will, hopefully grow the space in a more inclusive way.
Right. And kind of on that topic, Chris, I wanted to ask you kind of a similar question about, the way, you mentioned that Zynga is kind of expanding into console and that, it's always a matter of like trying to find new players or players that maybe don't consider themselves gamers. I guess, how do you look at that idea of, bringing in more diverse games or games that maybe aren't skewing more towards the higher end? And I guess, how do you look at that balancing act at Zynga and like trying to just expand the gaming audience that way?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I definitely think we're seeing, gaming diversify to many different audiences and platforms everywhere. Just recently, last month, we launched a game called Disco Loco 3D, which is this fun kind of like dancing game. You dance down a catwalk, you collect gems, you have to throw down dance moves. And we launched that on TikTok, and it was really interesting to see how a platform that you might not consider as a game platform, how viral these things become. The way we first got interested in TikTok is one of our divisions, Rollic, that builds hyper casual games, which are some of the most downloaded mobile games on the planet. High Heels, Hair Challenge, Blob Runner. They were getting tens of millions of downloads just through people talking about UGC, creating their own videos of these TikTokable moments inside their games. And this is kind of crazy because we spent almost nothing on marketing. People were just sort of like picking up the game, playing it, videoing it, putting it on TikTok, adding their own sort of like, special, flavor to it and sharing it with friends. And it was just taking off. So I think, gaming has only become available in more places for more people, for more places, more platforms, and more people. And I think that's a great thing. So I think all the future, when I look back when I was, younger, right, it's just like, it was pretty much either like PC or console games, right? Then mobile came along, right? And the internet, right? And now I think we're seeing the potential where games will literally be everywhere, and every type of person, if they don't consider themselves a gamer, will play. And that's exciting to me. It's like, to Kelly's point, that introduces lots of new narratives and, voices into the games industry, which is awesome.
Yeah, and to go back to your point, Kelly, how you're watching the Game Awards and everything kind of felt a little bit like everything looked a little bit the same. It was all a very kind of like hyper photorealistic single player game that, like, in many ways, like you said, was a throwback to when people didn't have internet connections and they didn't have the kind of social layer into gaming. I guess I'm just curious about your personal opinion on like whether I know you want to be like, you want to have an immersive RPG experience. I guess, how are you looking at those kinds of like next gen games and the way that in the direction you see the industry going?
Yeah, maybe my hot take is like, I think that's becoming more niche. And I mean, I think it's becoming like ballet or theater, that those experiences are going to appeal to a smaller group of people that will spend more money to engage in them. I mean, this is one of my thoughts around like how many of the debuts and trailers were in this vein, because, I think that's the way you get the word out about those experiences. Whereas for a lot of more social, web-based, mobile-based games and apps, there's a lot more of the word of mouth, like virality, and you're approaching your marketing and you're launching like in a completely different way. It's a bit tangential, but I guess I just feel like it's interesting to me that there still seems to be such a divide, that it's like the more social, casual space is still somehow not legitimate as much, even though it is bringing in more and more players into the fold. who then, may engage with those other experiences. Yeah, I think that answered your question.
Totally. I think we're running a little short on time, so I thought I would just end on something that I was just kind of personally curious to get all of your thoughts on, and it was also, somewhat related to the Game Awards. But I was wondering if any of you have seen the Chris, you mentioned the Unreal Engine 5 demo, the Matrix demo, and one of the things that Kim Libreri, who I was shocked to learn, was the stunt effects supervisor on the Matrix films. I didn't know that, but that's an amazing detail of his career. He was telling me that he sees a world in which, that when the tools are there, we can kind of bring objects, clothing, our physical appearances into virtual worlds, and that's kind of a really strong promise of the metaverse. I was wondering if any of you, while watching that demo and kind of looking into that a little bit more, do you want to have a world in which we have photorealistic virtual worlds that are indistinguishable from reality, or do you think that kind of takes away from the reason that we play games, and that we're there for other things?
I mean, I think maybe Frederick knows more about this than I do, but just like one of the things I would lead with is both. I think there's use cases where having that sort of crossover makes a lot of sense. One of the things that, I remember from, back in grad school that we used to focus on is trying on jeans is really hard, right? And you have to go and find a pair of jeans that fits you uniquely, right? And one of the use cases for virtual worlds I think could be very compelling that crosses over there is, what if you knew your body dimensions, had them uploaded to your avatar, and you could try them on virtually in, the virtual world, see your avatar, and then if it all fits and looks good and matches with other outfits that you wear, then great, you buy them and they show up in real life on your front door, right? So in that case, having, I think, a photorealistic experience makes sense, right? So it's immersive and it crosses over between virtual world and real world. But there's so many use cases like we've talked about here where that doesn't need to be the case, right? Like Minecraft, mobile games, making sure that we have accessibility to lots of different experiences, I think, is where it's really going.
I think we know and we don't know, right? What Chris was giving you is a very skeuomorphic response, from the big corporation expected, but we don't know. Nobody predicted Minecraft. Nobody predicted Pokemon Go. Nobody predicted almost any of the big phenomenons. And to even the opposite, right? Like Minecraft came out, the graphics were so crappy, but it was so immersive. Same thing with some of the Zynga games. Same thing with, it's a repeat almost in some ways. For sure, we still have the beautiful console, PC games, etc. We still have casual, fun mobile games. We have photorealistic games, VR games, etc. But likely, lots of things are going to come out that we had no idea. Especially maybe at the exec level, it's going to be lots of it's going to be bottom up. We're thinking very skeuomorphically in some way, meaning we try to apply what we think is happening or is in gaming industry, e-commerce, and merge it, conflagrate it in some. But likely it's going to be something very, very different, and likely it might come from crypto, right? As much as the industry, lots of people in the industry, supposedly the Twitter sphere, some aspects of it like to deride crypto. There is, and yes, lots of the games are not great. Lots of the teams are not great. Lots of the projects are never going to create anything besides selling some land here and there. But there is so much innovation. There is so much passion. So maybe the next big gaming companies are going to come from that, right? The next big gaming phenomenon. So they might not look like games. Look at Axie Infinity. We all can debate the merit of it and the fact it's maybe a so-so game. You have tens and tens of millions of people who have played that game or are still playing it, right? So nobody saw that coming, right? Maybe not even the companies that make the game. And that's what's so exciting about our industry. That's what's so exciting about our industry. So exciting. I remember the day Pokemon Go launched. I tell you, this game would never have been launched at Zynga because it didn't check any of the boxes that the Zynga PMs are looking at. Your game is not approved. Pokemon Go would never have launched, but guess what? We are all leaving work to go play Pokemon Go, and we still do, right? So nobody saw that coming, and it came from innovation and from a place that was very, very contradictory and contrarian in some ways. So
maybe the Zynga when you worked here, but not Zynga today, right? I mean,
to be fair,
don't check the boxes, right? So,
right.
Talking about
maybe it has changed. Maybe it has changed.
Kelly, I'm curious what you thinking, about a photorealistic reality that we can't kind of distinguish from a real world, but also, whether that's something you think players are going to want, or whether we're really going to want to be there.
I mean, I feel like right now we're living in a moment where it is possible for you and me to live in separate realities right now on this call.
Right.
And I think about that a lot. And it's certainly the aspect of Niantic's mission that is about the together, connecting people together through playfulness is something that is really a value of mine. And I hope that the more we can connect one another and hopefully find those moments where we are the same and we're just enjoying each other's presence, can help build a new reality that is inclusive and more united.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really great point to make, and a really great point to end on. So I just wanted to thank you all three for joining me. This was an absolutely fascinating conversation. I'm glad we covered so many different topics and didn't have to go too deep on non-fungible tokens, because I think we could have said a lot about that. Maybe that'll be the next panel. Actually, I'm almost confident it will be our next panel. Will probably be related to crypto and gaming.
Well, your two newsletters today are all about crypto.
I know.
Right?
You're right.
I can't ignore it. It's coming for me. It's coming for all of us. But for right now, we thankfully avoided it. But I will say, just thank you all so much for coming. This was a great discussion.
Thank you. Have a good day. Happy holidays.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.